It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
Good afternoon. I know you're wondering what's coming on right now. I know you're sitting there with your hand on that dial and you just can't wait to turn that dial. Well, go ahead and turn it, because the old name of this show was The Left versus the Right. But my co-host and I have changed the name to Mesopotamia Today. We're going to talk about all the issues in Mesopotamia and who's winning the soccer games there and all that kind of thing. This is David Paterson on 77 WABC in New York. I am with the legendary Lionel. That's right. Double L is here today to share all the different experiences with me. And we're going to start with a very important date, Lionel. It's April 29th, this Tuesday. Do you know what April 29th, this Tuesday is?
I do, but I will let you tell me, sir.
It is the 100th day that President Trump has been in office. And my take is that if you go back and look at the old TV news shows or any of the newspapers, he's done something every one of those days. Even in the midst of the tariff just hysteria, he's winning a golf tournament at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, you would think he might have lost the tournament because of what was going on. I think it makes him focus more. And so my question to you to open the activities today is, how long can he keep having a day that he doesn't do something that we all hear about? This is longer than Joe DiMaggio's batting streak.
And Cal Ripken. Well, let me give you a name, and then we'll work backwards. Eric Brin. Now, don't pretend to know that name, but you'll know what he did. He was a fellow on the Ed Sullivan Show who used to spin the plates and the bowls, and they would play the march, the saber dance, and he would spin these, and he would say, "How does he keep all these bowls and plates going
in the air?"
That's who he was, on these sticks, and he would think they're wobbling, it's going to fall. That's President Trump. He is this Eric Brin. He's this ever ready. I'm using every social media, every cultural reference. He's the ever ready bunny. He never stops. Now, people might argue, is he doing a good job? Is he effective? Graffiti artists and burglars do things every day too. But I would suggest he's doing a very good job. But you are right. Compare him, dear sir, to this example of intransigence and torpor and lethargy, this ossified, cretinized, this man hobbled by decrepitude, who was never seen, who took more vacations, who was on Rehoboth Beach or whatever, passed out constantly. The contrast is just inordinate. So just for activity alone, I agree with you 100%. He is miraculous.
You lost me at ossified. So, to that end, not only has he been in the news and there's been some sort of action taken every day, but most of the actions were good. The immediacy with which he restructured the government, the ability that he had to really make people believe that we're making a turn. We're going to do things differently. I think that DOGE was not a bad idea.
No.
I would not have had it go at the warp speed that he had it because, you can in deinstitutionalizing, you can almost further the institution. But I think that was a good plan, and it's still working out. Where I am wondering what's going to happen next is the issues with him and Putin and, the Ukraine and that whole situation, because I think that the reason that the head of Ukraine can't come to an agreement is that they're asking him to give land away that he sees as his country's land.
Well, first, if there was a couple areas where I disagree with the president, and again, nothing to such an extent that I would want his predecessor or the threat of the predecessor's successor back. There's nothing. But as far as foreign affairs, foreign policy, it's a disaster. The bottom line is this. I'm not, sir, America first. I'm America only. It's not our beef. Whatever you want to do, whether we're going to get back to Donbass or Donetsk or Lugansk or what? Crimea? They had referenda. See, we don't understand what that is like. We've lived here, and the last time we had any kind of annex was Mexico, and that's it. You've got people who are Russians who have, through referenda, Crimea. Why are we even involved in this? In 1962, we almost went to war with Russia because they had putatively or Putinively in Cuba, which really was about the missiles in Turkey, but that's okay. But we almost went 90 miles away. We have the Monroe Doctrine. And Putin said in 2014, don't you have Ukraine enter NATO? That's my red line. And Putin doesn't lie. He doesn't bluster. I don't even know what we're talking about here.
This is interesting because you bring up something that would be very daring and at the same time very strong, which would be if the president just said to the Ukrainians, guess what? We're out of this. This is your problem.
Absolutely.
You deal with it.
Or go to NATO, go to Victoria Nuland, go to the people who pushed you. You were the ones who were responsible for this. This isn't my watch. Sir, as you recall, after the fall of the Soviet Union, 91, George Kennan and other people said, there should be no more NATO. NATO was a bulwark or a buffer, so to speak, against the Soviet Union. There is no more Soviet Union. Containment. This was the father of containment, the grand old man. Others from Kissinger on. You're goading them. What are you doing? And we went to them in 91 and said, we will not move one. They told Gorbachev, we will not move one inch east.
Laid the whole thing out.
And they lied to him. They double-crossed him.
And liberated all the countries that were under the communist doctrine.
Yes, but we said we told him, we said, if you were to unify Germany again, we promise you, NATO will not move 1 inch east towards Russia. And immediately, 7, 8, 9, we have been. By the way, the funniest thing was when Putin said, "Listen, can I join NATO?" He said, "What?" He said, "Well, we're Russia." He said, "This was a protector against the Soviet Union. There is no more Soviet Union. Can I join?" He goes, "Get out of here. What about the EU? Get out of here. Wait a minute. Play fair. This is Russophobic." You know what? Everybody knows what this is. It's Victoria Nuland, the Maidan conspiracy. But what I just told you, sir, 4 people in this country even would recognize and care about. The bottom line is this. We live in the Boris and Natasha world. Putin and Russia are the bad guys. Nothing they can do is right. So just back out of this and let's move on. The country won't even know we're not there anymore.
Because, as he would say, unfair to Local 12. As they did when Boris and Natasha were around.
I'll get you, little squirrel.
Yes, exactly. Now, as this progresses, it's very interesting also that the Senate and the House have had very little to say about what's going on. It's almost as if they're waiting for something to happen that probably isn't going to happen. And in other words, you don't hear anybody necessarily challenging the president's positions or even fostering any kind of advice here. It's really all being left to him.
Right.
And I think that's the way he likes it.
And nobody's talking about that because I think most of the focus is on the, quote, the collective Middle East. But remember, the moment dare I say that denouement, that moment where it all kind of came together was when Zelensky, who who knows, tooting out of his mind, who decides to turn in the Oval Office to the probably the next president, J.D. Vance, and says, J.D., listen to me. And Trump is thinking, what? Wait a minute. What? Do you know who I am? This was the moment. If I didn't know better, because I'm a professional wrestling fan at heart, I think somebody would say, okay, here's the finish. You're going to come in, you're going to yell at JD, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to throw you out, and then it'll be the Tuesday night at the Garden. I couldn't believe what happened. That's when America finally said, who is this guy? By the way, you do know that Zelensky's background from Kolomoisky. He was a servant of the people. He was a television star. It would be like putting Martin Sheen as the president of the United States because he was in West Wing. He's a fraud. And remember, do I have to bring up to you his famous organ playing? We'll talk about that later. With a certain appendage. You can't write this stuff. Most people don't know this. They have no clue as to what I'm talking about. Get out of Ukraine. It's not our business. America first. I just, on the way here, hit about 4 potholes. On the way here, I don't care about Kyiv.
As you said, the better policy would be America only.
Yes.
And that was very much the feeling of Americans before World War II until they were literally forced into the conflict. So
interesting as to why, but that's another story.
Yes. Well, I think there was a lot about that period of time that hasn't been accurately portrayed in history.
Oh, yes. remember, sir, what Tolstoy said. History would be a wonderful thing if only it were true.
That's right. We're here with Lionel on 77 WABC in New York, the show classically known as The Left versus the Right. But we're going to get to Mesopotamia later. Before that, now, in this type of a situation, if we've come this far as we did before, do you think if inevitably, if the Russians were able to oust Zelensky and take over the Ukraine, that Trump would be seen in the same light as Biden in Afghanistan? I actually don't think that would be the case, but I wondered if you do.
First of all, the idea that he doesn't want Ukraine, the idea that he's doing this to annex, he's going to seize it. Do you remember about the referenda about Crimea, about Lugansk, Donetsk, about the Maidan, about, there are people who are saying, we're Russian. What are you talking about, Ukrainian? Remember where Ukraine came from, cobbled together by Khrushchev. See, it's almost like Libya was put together by Mussolini. I mean, we don't understand how this thing works. But remember, when Putin and Zelensky met and they said, let's work this out, and who came in to throw a fly into that ointment? Boris Johnson, sent by NATO, sent by the Victoria Nuland group, and they go, oh, no. We're not going to have peace here. We want war because NATO, remember, David, if you don't mind me calling you David, because Lorraine would make no sense. But no Russia, no NATO. They exist for this fear of the Soviet Union, which it doesn't exist anymore. They tried to. This is nothing but goading. And by the way, he's still not in NATO as we speak.
Right.
What was the point of this? If that doesn't tell you everything, it was to sell missiles and General Dynamics or Raytheon. They benefited, not him, not the people of Kyiv and Kherson, and not at all.
Well, it certainly seems as if, as the president returns from the funeral of the Pope, that this will be the most interesting element of his service up to this point, where he decides to go with this now. Because he certainly has given the signals that he's just ready to leave this alone. And frankly, there hasn't been miraculous, opposition to that. I think, like you said, this is more of a game than it really is a conflict such as some that the country's been through in the past.
And when are we going to put sick, by the way, Elon's kind of backing out of this, but when are we going to sick DOGE on all the money that went to Zelensky and his wife. And what about, let's talk about some clawback. That's our money. Why is he a billionaire? If he ends up, what they say, maybe Cyprus, Miami, the States? No. Watch what happens. You think he's doing this on the cheap? Well, if he ends up in somewhere, in some palatial, a billionaire, let me say you what a lot of people are suggesting. Internally, they put it this way. There's an expression, as we say, I wouldn't buy the green bananas if I were him. There's a lot of people
right.
who really, put it this way, do not want to see him around. And it's not us, and it's not necessarily Russia. It's internal, because remember what they are. These are, we use the word Nazis. They're actually neo-Nazis from Stepan Bandera in those days, from the right sector, the Azov Battalion, people that are as hardcore. We get some guy with a little swastika and a flag. That ain't no Nazi. It's like Paul Hogan and Crocodile Dundee. That's a Nazi. This is a group of people we don't want to mess with. It is so labyrinthine, so complicated. And the best is to think that somebody on MSDNC is going to figure this out?
And it wouldn't be the first time that some leader of a country escaped with his spouse and somehow became one of the huge investors on Wall Street because they found some little place to hide, and inevitably had less respect for his country than even we had.
We could go down that list. I'm not suggesting in any particular order or culpability, but Assad... remember Baby Doc?
Oh, yes.
Pahlavi, the Shah's son. I mean,
right.
they just... And that's why when they give you a break, the real question is, nobody gave Saddam Hussein a break? We normally don't kill kings. I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but normally we let you leave, kind of professional courtesy.
Right, exactly.
Except you. And Gaddafi, which is another story.
Yes. Well, Gaddafi... He was really a thorn in our side for too long a time.
Not
Just
really. They
remember
loved him. No, they loved. Remember, not to go into this, but Libya was. It's Tripolitania, it's Cyrenaica, and Fezzan. Fezzan were they call them the black, the Africans. They loved him. He announced that he was going to make and exploit the Nubian sandstone aquifer. This is the largest aquifer probably in the world that Libya happens to sit atop. He was going to make the area arable. This is called hydro-imperialism. Did you see who the next the interim head of the WEF is? Head of Nestle. What do? Water. This is a casus belli, my friend.
Well, I'll just never forget at the end of every Bob Grant show right here on WABC, he would end by saying, "Get Gaddafi." And they got him probably in a different way than Bob would have thought, but in 2011 they got him. So now, just wondering if you think that the issues right here internally, just in the United States, the 100 days of president's service probably enhances his party's chances in the midterms, wouldn't you say? I
don't trust them for a moment. I am very frightened. There's, like I said, I don't want to go into detail. There's a lot what's going on that I'm not as happy as I could be, but that's neither here nor there. And if it is neither here nor there, where the hell is it? But I want to know who is his Mike Deaver? Who is his Len Nofziger? Who is his political expert? Who is his Lee Atwater? I'm going to
tell you who that is. Right after we take a short commercial break, or maybe longer if either of us has any kind of medical issue. And we should be back right here on The Left versus the Right. 77 WABC will be here until 4 o'clock when John Sterling returns to WABC with his show, which he will have every Saturday afternoon between 4 and 5. And we're the warm-up act, Lionel. We're like the people who come out and clean the field before the baseball game. But that's okay. We'll be right back.
It's the left versus the right. It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back on L&L and DP. We are not using our real names because both of us are being investigated. So the way we are going to move at this point is to talk about some issues that should basically be internally in the country, but they're not, because it seems like all the legislators like to go down and hang out in El Salvador these days.
Can you figure? By the way, speaking of it, you mentioned the subject matter. You know, last week we talked about Niels Bohr and particle physics and supersymmetry. Coming up next segment, we're going to be doing Schrodinger's cat and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Yes.
For those keeping score at home.
Yes, exactly.
People were just wowed by that.
Heisenberg's uncertainty is
which I'm kind of uncertain about and indifferent completely.
Exactly.
Hence the theory. But as a lawyer, as somebody trained in the law, just from a jurisdictional point of view, how do we go to El Salvador and check on somebody they have? We don't have jurisdiction anymore. He ain't here. He's not an American citizen. He was here.
And the head of the country said we're not sending him back.
Yes. And he's a bad person. And then you have scores of people, and progressive lefty friends of mine are saying, well, what about the due process? And I said, to their chagrin, what about the Americans who were thrown into some D.C. underground gulag after January 6th? Some of these people who were just standing there, who just got caught up in a dragnet. Or people who went inside, or somebody who knocked over a photocopier, and nobody cares. Jurisdiction, due process, what about that? We live in a country, sir, where we have some Luigi Mangione that's being heralded as a hero, and another one who's in El Salvador, who's a member of one of the worst gangs ever.
And what's interesting is when he first got sent there, the information about, there were accusations, but there was no solid information about what his gang affiliation was. After he got there, it came out that his wife wouldn't even answer the question of whether or not she thought he was going to kill her. And for someone to be put in that position where they give that kind of answer tells you everything you need to know about their spouse and the violence that
I got one
occurred.
more for you. What about the person who doesn't want to go back because he said, you can't send me back because the other rival gang's going to kill me? The what? The rival gang. What rival gang? To me, I'm an MS-13. The other one is like, wait a minute, what? I mean, and the last time, do we have to give a good reason? I mean, I understand there are, because the Constitution, as you know, deals with persons, there are minimal due process. I don't care what you are, just because you're not a citizen, you have the rights to process, notice, fair hearing, the opportunity to be heard, all the rudimentary processes of due process. I get that. But short of the fact that you lied, you're a gang member, you're an undesirable, get out. A court can't say to the president, no, he must stay. And by the way, because you, Mr. Obama apologist, and don't you back up with it, my friend. I'm kidding, of course. I love it. But let's talk about Mr. Obama's deporting.
I remember when his adversaries, advocates, used to refer to him as deporter in chief.
Right.
His deportations were greater than any of the other presidents before or after him. The only person that surpassed him was President Trump. But he was deporting people all the time, and he was denying entry to people coming from the outside from the time he got there in 2009 until he left. But that's another story. The thing that is really peculiar about this entire situation is that there doesn't seem to be a regular course of conduct with identifying those who really need to be deported and those who just may not have all the requisite information that they need to be here. But down the road, I see this as a continuing battle between the two parties.
But you're right. But I guess what bothers me the most is this schizoid concern about due process from a political party that basically had free speech shelved when they went to social media platforms and had them act as proxies, when people were basically isolated to a veritable modern-day version of Elba who dared to disagree with, COVID protocols. They had no problem with due process deprivation there. But this son of a gun, Kilmar, very punny, you do the math, Kilmar Garcia. This is their what? Their Rosa Parks, with all due respect, seriously, Kilmar, George Floyd, Luigi Banjoni, this isn't hero worship. I don't even know what it is. Of all the people, we had a young man who survived cancer. This is a no-brainer. And the White House. And everybody loved him. And he wanted to be a police officer. And he had the scars from the surgery. And African-American. Ding, check, 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 check. And they turned their back on him. They laughed. They didn't look at him. I'm thinking, what planet? You think somebody would say, stand up. It's a kid. But no, it's like they're doubling down. And who represents the constituency of Democrats? Who wants this? Who agrees with them? Yes, bring back the gang members. The hell with these cancerous kids. The hell with and people who slaughter the CEOs of healthcare in cold blood like a dog in the street. That's what happened to the Democrats, to the progressives, or this.
I think what happened, Lionel, is that they become sympathizers to the individuals when the individuals themselves are just symbolic of the cause. Mm-hmm. So let's just take Mr. Garcia. Again, when he first went down there, and even the White House admitted that he shouldn't have been on the list to go, and everybody was supportive of him coming back. But then the stories that came out about him, and of course, the original stories, could be rumors or, just to try to control the headlines. But then when his own wife gave him up, does anybody care about his wife?
What about the Me Too movement? Now, if this had been Harvey Weinstein, it
would have been a horror. It would have been a horror. And yet he was engaging in things that were worse than Harvey Weinstein was doing to women. But I think there's a feeling among activists that once you embrace the cause, you can't let it go, no matter what happens.
Right. That's true.
And I think that's really what the problem is, because, at first when I heard about it, I thought, man, listen to the Supreme Court, arranged to get him back home. But then when you find out what really happened, and the people in El Salvador, they don't want to send him out of there. There's no reason for that. But Lionel, your point is profound. There are, let's take George Floyd. Now, George Floyd, that was 9 minutes of absolute torture. Derek Chauvin, the police officer, he got the punishment that he really deserved. But there was no reason to champion George Floyd as being the face of police brutality, because George Floyd never did anything that was basically positive in his own life.
Not only that, but with all due respect, some people are saying no. The Emmy, certain people were not allowed to testify. Some people thought it was an overdose versus whatever. And when you can't breathe, you can't say, "Hey, I can't breathe." No. If you can't breathe, you can't speak. I don't want to get into this. I'm not. But in terms of optics, oh my God, no. Here's the bottom line is simply this. I will tell you that I don't think it's a good idea just because we deport you. I don't sit there and say, hey, give me the name of a really bad. Is Devil's Island open? Yeah. Send them but this is an 84-year-old Italian, but send her ass to Devil's Island. That, you might have a point with that one, but you have no substantive rights to be here. You're almost at the pleasure of the president. And if you and I went to, it's so funny. I have a friend of mine who all of a sudden is so worried about this Garcia, and she happens to be or trying to get double citizenship. So she's going through the process, and let's say the other country is Italy, okay? So I said, what the hell do you care? You just show up and say, hey, I'm going to come in here. I want insurance. I want a place to stay, and I don't want to be taxed. Why don't you do that? Why are you going through all of this? Why are you going through, you got to get this and the passport, and you've got to show your lineage? Why? Who actually thinks this is the way you move into a country? By showing up with put it this way, how many times have you heard that, for example, that Mick Jagger couldn't get in because he had a pot, he got smoked a joint in the 60s, and he's still going through problems. To this day, Mick blanking Jagger and Kilmar, none of this makes any sense.
Maybe Mick should go to El Salvador and see if he can help him out.
Right.
They could have a couple of margaritas while
Indeed.
they're there. But you've really raised a point.
Damn right
that I struggle with all the time, which is that when you embrace a political position or even what you consider to be a human rights position, the victims of it are not always pure and without malice and without issues in their past. Now, there could be people who had issues in their past and something happened to them after that and someone raises it, and that's probably not fair. But the idea that you now have to hang on to an ideology, basically, that's developed from a single incident is really one of the most difficult problems that we're having right now. And the reason why there's an inability of my party right now to gain the public trust, because they don't know, while they trust you, they don't know who you trust. And if that comes out, then you start to have a problem.
Let me tell you what if somebody hired me, if I was like the Lee Atwater or the Roger Stone or the Donald Segretti, or I don't know whoever you want.
All of them inferior to you, by the way.
Well, indeed. I would go into the Democratic Party and I'm saying, okay, I don't know who's in charge here, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to lie. We're going to take everything that Trump did, and you're going to claim you did it first. We're going to go into homes. We're going to say, "Are you getting your Social Security?" Yes. And we're going to pretend we're actually going to do these. We're going to deal with veterans, and we're going to talk about. We're going to get off this trans business. I don't know anybody who's clamoring for trans rights. Nobody. I've never met one. In fact, I'm going to go on this on the record here. I've been here for almost my entire life. Half of my adult life I've been in New York. I've known one trans.
You know one.
One. I mean, actual legit. Now, I know people who are non-binary. I'm not saying they don't exist, but trust me what I'm telling you. Just like Greta Thunberg, who came out of nowhere, who said, "How dare you? I could be in school." And we said, "Who the hell is this?" I'm being lectured by this person who's screaming at me. All of a sudden, out of the blue came this. At first, remember we talked about it before. It was not bisexual, but bathrooms are shared. And instead of the Democrats saying no, we're going to go back to things like taxes and jobs and the military and crime and all that stuff with a kind of a flair, with maybe a liberal flair. They said, "Oh no, we're in. We're going to stop what we're doing, and we're going to go after Kilmar. We're going to go after John Waters' dystopian drag shows in public schools. We're going to be teaching kids about..." You watch libs of TikTok on X, or it used to be Twitter, and you're thinking, is this existing? What's happening to the Democratic Party? Where did they come from? Did you see Dick Durbin the other day? He was stopped in the hall by somebody from Fox. He says, "What do you do about Epstein?" Huh? Epstein, the flight logs. The flight logs? I haven't heard anything about that. What are you talking... So it's that kind of a thing. Where have you been?
I don't really know how to answer that.
That's readily apparent. You're stultified. I don't blame you.
Now, when we come back, on Friday I read something, and I have to admit that I had some sympathy for the advocates in this particular case. there's a number 988. If you dial
Yes.
that number, it's the suicide number.
yes.
And apparently you have three choices. One is, I think I'm going to commit suicide. The other is, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the third is, I'm LGBTQ and I might be thinking about committing suicide. Because of the number of people who have dialed that number and the ability of the individuals who answer the calls and talk to these people, I don't think it's such a great idea to just eliminate that one group because they happen to be gay or lesbian.
Eliminate? Absolutely not. Oh, no, elimination, not at all. But as a national platform to introduce them into, especially introducing them to grade school kids at Force Library, again, these dystopian, weird, it's like a John Waters, like, who was the, not I can't remember her name, but anyway.
I'll remember her name.
Yes.
But we have to pause for a brief commercial message. This is Lionel and David here on the left versus the right. And because it is the left versus the right, in the next segment, I want to talk a little bit about one of your favorite subjects, professional wrestling.
Okay, good.
We'll be right back.
It's the left versus the right. It's the left versus the right. Debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
We're back on what we occasionally call the left versus the right. And I'm with Lionel. He was kind enough to join us last week, and we had to bring him back for an encore. And we were just about to talk about...
And heard, by the way, not to interrupt, which I am, Saturdays and Sundays, 2 a.m. to 5 a.m.
And I tell you, it's interesting because, you know, the Pope's funeral was at 4 a.m. this morning, and I should have gotten up to watch it and to call in to the Lionel show, but tomorrow's another day.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So we are. So we were talking about that issue. That why take the issues of not just like discrimination of LGBTQ people, but also why that becomes the focus of campaigns for the Democratic Party. And it's not to say that it's running away from people who, you know, may have been denied their rights in a number of situations, and they deserve accountability from the government. But how does that become the primary issue in discussion? That's where we left off.
But not even the discussion. A lot of people are saying, listen, that's one thing. But when you have kids being pulled out of their school, CPS and Child Protective Services and others coming in and listening to a child who doesn't even know his favorite color yet, or her favorite color, or their favorite color, who all of us have said, you know, maybe I feel like I don't know, maybe I'm, and then all of a sudden pulled out of the school, a special guardian ad litem is appointed. They go before a court can then allow either puberty blocking or worse to occur. This was not only advocated, it happened, at least I think, minimally, but this became the bellwether, the pole star, the, dare I say, the gravamen of their cause. What? That has nothing to do with recognizing the fact that people shouldn't be discriminated. When you had men all of a sudden who were infiltrating women's sports, that had nothing to do. It was that radicalized. It was, I mean, put it this way, civil rights is one thing, the 1619 Project and CRT is another, or whatever. The two have nothing to do with each other. Nobody's for racism. Nobody's for gender discrimination or sexual affiliation discrimination. That's not what they're for. It's lunacy. And to show you this guy and who are going to be the leaders, AOC and Bernie. Are you kidding me? I mean, somebody, if I didn't know better, I'm thinking these guys are ringers. Somebody's deliberately trying to destroy the Democratic Party.
And they talk about AOC running against Senator Chuck Schumer, which, I don't think that will be a particularly close race, just because of his accountability and his. I mean, he is an animal when it comes to campaigning.
Well, put it this way: he's the Senator Pothole. He's the Alphonse D'Amato avatar.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she is a leader of that party. Don't kid yourself. And she speaks to a group of people. But I think that faction, because remember, look what they're doing to Durbin. Durbin, they basically said, beat it. And they're going to do the same thing. They're going to tell the same thing to Schumer. They're going to say, look, this is not working. Thank you very much for your service. Here's a copy of the home game. Now, we've got to move on here.
But in the past, Lionel, that was done to politicians, say, in the Democratic Party in the mid-'60s when they opposed a lot of the civil rights legislation. And it was just clear that they were out of touch, out of their time period. And a lot of them got voted out and a lot of them got pushed out. But this is different because when the moderates get pushed out, you're going to wind up with a party that's so radical that you can't beat anybody.
Good.
I mean, the AOC could set the record. And I just thought that George McGovern wanted to keep this record for the rest of his life, but she will actually surpass him. He won one state, the state of
even his own DC, wasn't it? No,
he won Minnesota.
Oh, Minnesota
in 1984, and she could win no states in 2028. But still be a presidential candidate.
By the way, her legacy for me, maybe this is too provincial or parochial or what have you, but what she did, remember when the great folks of Long Island City said, an Amazon factory, yes. Remember the real estate overnight? People said, yes, Long Island City, yes, this is terrific. And then what was the reason for that? She put an end, she basically killed that?
Well, it's interesting.
I'll never forget that one.
Because Joe Concha and I had a disagreement about this. She had the biggest name of the people who were against it. But the people who were against it got that way because the governor at the time, Andrew Cuomo, certainly just had this press conference, talked about all these different things that were going to happen. He had negotiated with Amazon by himself, didn't include anybody.
So kill it.
So the borough president of Queens, Claire Schulman, the Congressman Gregory Meeks, the state senator Malcolm Smith, who was majority leader of the Senate, succeeded me there at that particular time. All of these people were up in arms. But AOC, because she's a darling of the media, actually got the credit.
She was a lightning rod.
And they were all kicking themselves that they didn't even get mentioned because they and it was really.
Listen, that's going to benefit them later on. Believe me or not, that's going to, because they're going to say, oh, no, that was her.
Yeah, that's right.
Were you responsible for killing the biggest? Oh, no. Right.
She did it. And, But they were furious, and the governor had to back away and let it go eventually. It's interesting you bring that up, but this kind of I don't and it's interesting because the Republican Party really after their opposition to a lot of programs and practices in the 60s and 70s. Really kind of clean their act up. George, what's his name from Long Island? He got 7 years on Friday.
Santos.
Santos. He got 7 years. And nobody in the Republican Party is saying, no, you can't do that to George. He's speaking the truth. And
nobody's going to his prison to seek his release. They
really...
But Kilmar, that's a different story.
Yeah, exactly. But they really learned how to bury people that were hurting the entire party.
Or just turn your back on them. Just turn your back. It's funny you say that. Remember years ago, for our younger folks, the Southern strategy Remember when Nixon and others got together with Strom Thurmond and said, you know what, this is when Democrats and the Dixiecrats and before this, they reached out and said, listen, Strom, we can help you out here. You know, we're in charge of this Department of Justice, you know, and if you go Republican, because them Democrats ain't helping you out, come with us and we'll take care of it. We might just hit the brakes on some of those civil rights, you know what I mean? And they said, wait a minute. Next thing you know, we bring them on. And then Reagan later on said, brings in the moral majority and the gun rights and the Second Amendment and the libertarians and the Tea Parties. And the tent got really big. What's the Democratic tent? Who are they? Who are these people? The other day we had did you see the 50-51, the 50-50, 50 states, 50 city, whatever, 50 issues?
Yeah.
What was that about?
Nothing that will change anybody's mind. I'll put it that way.
Nothing.
Absolutely. So now I have to ask you this question. Back in the day, who was your favorite wrestler?
Oh, simple. I'm Southern. I'm NWA. The greatest wrestler of all time in my lifetime was Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes, hands down.
He was terrific.
But you were here, so you were WWF. You were Vince Senior.
Yes.
You were into the Sheik, and you were into Johnny Jonathan, and
I remember
Bruno and
that Bruno Sammartino and Gorilla Monsoon. We're going to have this big match at Madison Square Garden. And Gorilla Monsoon is on Saturday, and I think Vince McMahon was doing the commentary at the time. He succeeded Ray Morgan, who was the original wrestling guy, and Gorilla Monsoon beats up some guy, and then instead of leaving the room, he continues to beat the guy up. He shoves the referee out of the way. The guy who announces who won the match runs for his life because Gorilla's just beating everybody up. And Bruno comes in the ring and throws Gorilla Monsoon off the ropes, flips him over his back. He hits the ground, comes off the ropes again, and Gorilla Monsoon caught him with a forearm to the neck. Bruno's lying on the ground, and he did those two where you jump up, big splash, and then he leaves. Bruno's lying in the room, in the ring. The 6 people are trying to get him out. I'm about 13, 14. Right. I couldn't sleep.
Right.
Because I knew Bruno was going to get his butt kicked at Madison Square Garden, but somehow, some way, Bruno won that match.
I was the same way. My father took me to the Armory in Tampa, where I grew up, on Tuesday nights. I came home after the first match and said, this is the most incredible thing you've ever seen. He goes, that was the first match. It was like 7:30. I had to go till 11. My mother told my father, don't you ever take him. Quick trivia question. Do we have time for 1 second? This is an absolute fact. George Wagner, Gorgeous George, was responsible for, and they will acknowledge it, James Brown, Elton John, Elvis Presley, glam rock, Liberace, post-World War II, America the toughest. Here comes this guy out, this effeminate guy with the gold hair, throwing golden bobby pins. He had the ropes. He created that. Gorgeous George, out of nowhere, because this was the days of hook wrestling and Lou Thez and Strangler Lewis. They didn't know what this was. People were, and then in the 80s, one of the greatest gimmicks ever, so at the height of the, or height, as some people say, at the height of the Iranian hostage, you've got the Iron Sheik, who actually was one of the Shah's bodyguards, and Sergeant Slaughter. In absolute, talk about too soon, they were going to, it was the greatest moment ever. And one last thing, when I grew up in the South, professional wrestling never cared about history. We had this group called the Von Brauners. These 2 Nazis, bald-headed with, of course, the claw. And who was their manager? Gentleman Saul Weingroff, a Jew who wore a Nazi helmet. I mean, none of it made sense. Samoans were crazy. Japanese were both spraying things. It was the greatest entertainment I ever saw in my life.
Oh, it was fantastic.
It was enervating.
I went to see a person who was representing me, my lawyer, and this guy comes out and he's sitting. They had to sign some papers. He turns out to be the Iron Sheik. Oh. This is at 42nd Street and 3rd Avenue. So I start talking about wrestling. He gives me a picture of him, and he's talking, and I said, well, why did you come to see this guy? He goes, I got body slammed in the ring and my back is messed up and the WWE won't pay for it, blah, blah, blah. And so then finally he leaves and the lawyer said, no, he fell in the shower. And he tried to blame it on the WWE. But
and by the way, the original Sheik was Eddie Farhat, who had the pencil. He had never spoke. He knew no wrestling. He knew nothing. No punches, no finishes, no angles, nothing. He had a pencil, and he would grab you like this and rip your head open with a pencil. That's it. The original Sheik was great. Out of Detroit, I think. Ed Farhat. One of my favorites. One of the best heels ever. Scared people. Because that's the whole, David, this is life. Babyface and heels, good guy, bad guy, the finish, the work, bringing heat. It's what politics is. It's what left and right is, or whatever the hell this is that we're doing.
But who was the George Stewart set the stage for
George
all
Wagner?
of it.
Yep,
that's
and they will acknowledge that the capes and this whole thing. By the way, I had the chance years ago to know people like the great Gordon Soley. Bobby Heenan was a great friend of mine.
Oh, Gordon Soley from Florida.
Yes. Oh, my dear friend.
They showed a lot of the Florida wrestling
from Georgia
up here.
You saw it on WTBS, WCW.
Right.
And Gordon Soley was my dear friend, and Gordon taught me everything. But I'll tell you, and I can tell you some really good stories behind the scenes. But what people don't recognize is that this was a time that brought everybody together. And you haven't lived until you're in this sweaty armory with a 80-year-old woman with a pterodon and a muumuu yelling, F you! And we had one night there was a wrestler who was shot. Another one. But the guy that I met who was the most interesting was Lou Thez, was the original hooker, which was because he hooked. And he was a crippler. And his patriarch, whatever it's, was Ed Strangler Lewis.
Oh, yeah. They talked a lot about him.
Oh, yes.
And there we go, folks. That's the end of the show.
Physics,
Lionel
wrestling.
was here another week. Ed Strangler Lewis once challenged, I think it was Jack Dempsey, to a fight, and they couldn't get them to fight.
But Cowboy Luttrell did.
Yes.
And blinded Cowboy Luttrell. Jack Dempsey.
Yeah.
To be continued.
To be continued. Thank you, everybody. The left and the right. Stay tuned for John Sterling, the voice of the Yankees, and now the voice of afternoons on Saturdays, WABC, signing off. See you next week.